The desert was merciless at noon. Heat shimmered off the tarmac of Falcon Ridge Air Station until it seemed the whole base floated in a restless mirage. Inside Hangar 12, the air conditioning wheezed and failed against the furnace outside. The space smelled of hot metal, jet fuel, and sweat, a scent every mechanic knew by heart. Engines rumbled. Power tools shrieked. A radio somewhere crackled with clipped instructions that sounded like another language to civilian ears. And into that storm of noise and heat walked Marissa Hale. She didn't look like anyone worth noticing. Middle-aged, maybe late 40s. Hair pinned in a severe bun streaked with gray. Her coveralls were worn thin at the knees, her steel-toe boots scuffed and cracked. She carried a clipboard patched with tape and a toolbox that looked older than some of the airmen working the hangar. She walked with quiet certainty, not swagger, like a woman who had done this 1,000 times before. At the duty desk, Staff Sergeant Harlan, a broad-shouldered man with grease permanently etched under his nails, glanced up as she signed in. Her handwriting was blocky, clean, practiced. The kind you saw from people who'd filled out reports in the back of Humvees while dust storms raged, or in bunkers while mortars rained outside. Structural assessment, Blackhawks? Harlan asked, reading her papers. Yes, Sergeant. Been a while since we've had anyone from your outfit. He frowned at the signature line. Last guy couldn't tell a rotor hub from a landing skid. Marissa's tone was simple, even, I'm not the last guy. Harlan studied her for a moment. There was something about the way she said it. The steadiness of her stance, the weight in her tone. He'd learned under old-school chiefs who could diagnose an engine just by the sound, who could fix anything with a wrench, tape, and a little profanity. Marissa had that same aura. Well, Harlan said at last, scratching his jaw, your bird's in Bay 12. Pre-flight's done, but feel free to run your own checks. She nodded and walked on, her boots heavy on the hangar floor. That's when Corporal Jason Weller noticed her. Jason was 22, and he thought the chevrons on his chest meant he ran the world. Fresh out of technical school, he had the kind of sharp-creased uniform and mirror-polished boots that screamed rookie. His confidence came not from experience, but from volume. It had been a bad week. He'd flunked a systems exam. His supervisor had chewed him out for sloppy tool accountability. 3 of his peers had been promoted while he stayed behind. So he was itching to prove himself. Hey, ma'am, he called, not bothering to walk over. He wanted her to come to him. You here for avionics inspection? Marissa looked up from her clipboard. Her eyes were calm, assessing. Not hostile. Not submissive. Just watchful. Structural assessment, she corrected gently. Clearance documentation is in order. She offered the folder. Jason flipped through it, squinting at the signatures and stamps like he knew what he was looking at. He didn't. 3 other mechanics drifted closer. Specialist Avery, barely 19, soft-handed and new. Private Chin, always laughing at something, quick with a joke. And Airman Rodriguez, older than the others, but too eager to fit in. Jason smirked. Says you're cleared for structural. That doesn't mean avionics. Structural includes avionics mounts, Marissa said evenly. It's been that way since 2018. Chin chuckled. She knows the regs better than you, man. Jason flushed but held his ground. He had an audience now. Backing down wasn't an option. Regulations changed again. New security protocols. Can't have unauthorized electronics near sensitive gear. He crossed his arms, trying to look official. You'll need to verify you're not carrying contraband. The hangar quieted. Not silent, but hushed. Everyone felt the line being crossed. Rodriguez shifted uneasily. Maybe let it go, Corporal. Jason cut him off. Standard procedure. Top half, strip check. It wasn't. Every single person knew it wasn't. But Jason was banking on her age, her quietness, her outsider status. He thought she'd fold. Marissa stood still for a long moment, clipboard in hand. She could have called Harlan. Could have demanded a supervisor. Could have walked away and let someone else deal with the corporal's arrogance. Instead, she set the clipboard down, tugged at her zipper, and began unfastening her coveralls. Holy hell, Avery whispered. The fabric peeled to her waist. Underneath was only a faded gray t-shirt. No jewelry. No hidden electronics. Just practical underlayers. She tied the sleeves around her hips and stood there, arms loose at her sides. Happy now? She asked quietly. Jason grinned. Turn around. She did. And that's when everything changed. The t-shirt clung just enough to reveal the ink burned into her back with surgical precision. Not art. Not vanity. A triangle sharp as a blade pointing downward. Beneath it, a string of numbers, coordinates. At the base, just above her waistband, the silhouette of a hawk with wings spread wide. The young mechanics laughed nervously. Chin muttered, probably some old guard thing. Avery smirked, Granny's got biker tats. But Rodriguez froze. His grandfather had once shown him photographs, faded, forbidden pictures of units that officially never existed. He remembered the way his grandfather's voice had dropped when he said, "You'll never read about them in books, but they kept us alive." That same chill now ran down Rodriguez's spine. And then the hangar doors opened. Colonel Marcus Renner strode in with two senior officers. He was mid-sentence when his eyes landed on Marissa's back. The folder in his hand slipped and hit the concrete with a crack. The sound cut across the bay like a gunshot. Jesus Christ, Renner whispered. Because he knew exactly what he was looking at. For a heartbeat, the hangar forgot how to breathe. Colonel Marcus Renner stood frozen in the doorway, his dropped folder fanned across the concrete like a busted deck of cards. The two officers at his shoulder, Major Kim and Captain Ortiz, followed his stare and went still in the same instant, their expressions shifting from confusion to alarm. Renner moved first. Stand down, Corporal, he said, voice flat, carrying. The words cut through the din like a blade. Impact drivers fell silent. Conversations died mid-sentence. Even the distant radio chatter seemed to lower itself. Weller pivoted, the bravado draining from his face. Sir, I was just conducting. I said stand down. Renner crossed the floor at an unhurried, terrifying pace, eyes never leaving the woman with the gray t-shirt and the triangle etched between her shoulder blades. He stopped close enough to see the fine white lines of old scars at the edge of the ink. Ma'am, he said softly, the steel in his tone turned inward. You can get dressed. Marissa Hale nodded once. No flinch. No apology. She pulled her coveralls up, zipped them with neat efficiency, and tied off the collar. When she turned back around, her gaze was level, the surface of a lake that had learned to swallow stones. Chin still had his phone half-raised, trying not to be obvious about it. Renner didn't look at him when he said, delete it. Sir? Now. And then you put that device away and you don't take it out again in this hangar unless you're calling your mother to tell her how much trouble you're in. Chen's thumbs stumbled. The phone disappeared. Renner exhaled. The hard part, oddly, wasn't anger. It was recognition. The triangle. The coordinates. The hawk. Not art. Not vanity. A roll call for ghosts. He turned, voice shifting from quiet to command. Everyone who is not Staff Sergeant Harlan or on my escort, out. Now. If you heard something, you didn't. If you saw something, you didn't. Boots scraped. Mechanics scattered, stumbling over apologies and toolboxes. Weller lingered for half a breath too long. You, Renner said without looking at him, report to my office at 1400 with your supervisor. Do not be late. Yes, sir. Weller's throat worked. He moved. When the hangar had emptied to a respectful quiet, Renner faced Marissa again. The muscles in his jaw eased. Ms. Hale. Colonel. May we speak privately? He tipped his head toward the shadowed end of the bay, behind a half-draped rotor assembly. She considered him for a long second, measured, not wary, then nodded. Harlan pretended to organize a cart within eyesight and earshot and somehow out of both. Renner kept his voice low. That unit was decommissioned. Officially, Marissa said. There are no records. There aren't supposed to be. Those coordinates, he cut himself off, swallowed the rest. Some things were better left unvoiced, even with clearance. Especially with clearance. Colonel, she said, tone as steady as the horizon, I'm here to do a structural assessment and file a report. The simplicity of it hit him harder than any argument. If there was fear in her, it was locked away behind triple-barred doors. If there was anger, it had been filed and shelved a long time ago. He drew a breath, nodded. Then we'll get you what you need. Access to the birds in 12, 2, and 4. And a copy of the last 30 flight hours on the Bravo series. Paper if you have it. Renner almost smiled. We'll find paper. He took 2 steps back, turned toward the officers. Major. Captain. Ensure Ms. Hale has unrestricted access to bays 4, 12, and 2. Staff Sergeant, you're her point of contact. Anyone obstructs her, you send them to me. Aye, sir, Harlan said, a little too quickly. He'd seen plenty in his time. He had not seen this. Marissa picked up her clipboard as if they'd merely paused to take a drink of water. I'll start with 12. Ms. Hale, Renner said, stopping her with a word. When she looked over, there was something like apology at the edges of his expression. This shouldn't have happened. It's not the worst room I've been in, she said. Not bravado. Just fact. He let her go. The Black Hawk in Bay 12 wore a skin of dust and pride. Marissa climbed the access stand and set her toolbox in its usual spot, left side, reachable without looking. The ritual of it lowered the noise in her head. Hands first. Then eyes. Then instruments. She ran fingertips over fasteners until she felt the one with just a hair more play than it should. Checked safety wire angles with a glance. Tapped the hub casing with the knuckle of her index finger and listened to the reply. Metal speaks, people forget to listen. Hydraulic 2's running hot, she said without looking down. Harlan, tablet in hand, blinked. We flagged that for the next overhaul. You'll want to move it up. She guided his palm to the mount. Feel that? The frequency's wrong. Housing's expanding under load. His brows climbed. The readings on his screen confirmed it, but he already believed her. 30 years of turning wrenches had taught him to trust what he could feel. Still, there was a difference between trusting your own hand and having it calibrated by someone like her. Marissa moved to the tail rotor assembly. Blade track. Pitch control links. She closed her eyes, pressed the pads of her fingers to the trailing edge of each blade, and found the one that lied. 2 millimeters off, she said. Been creeping for weeks. Harlan checked the pilot notes, vibration complaints that had never risen to grounding. Hell, he whispered, impressed and irritated at the same time, the way good craftsmen get when someone shows them a shortcut they hadn't known was there. Major Kim hovered a respectful distance away, trying to look like he wasn't learning something. Captain Ortiz took notes he could not put in any official system. Marissa cut a loose safety wire an inch from the point where a high-pressure line made a habit of punishing mistakes. She tightened, trimmed, and didn't comment. Do you? Kim cleared his throat. Do you still fly? Marissa didn't answer right away. I sign my name like I'm going to, she said at last. That's enough. They worked like that for an hour and a half. No drama. No narrative. Just a woman taking a helicopter apart with her senses and putting it back together with the truth. Word, as it always does, outpaced orders. Senior NCOs drifted past on invented errands. They didn't stare. They watched, quietly, with a recognition that has nothing to do with stripes. Airman Rodriguez edged closer, guilt stitched into his posture. Ma'am, he said softly when she stepped down from the stand. I'm sorry. For what? She asked, not unkind. For not speaking up sooner. She considered him, then nodded once. Next time, you will. He swallowed. Yes, ma'am. At 1400, Corporal Jason Weller stood outside the colonel's office with Technical Sergeant Mills, a supervisor who looked like he'd chewed gravel for breakfast and found it unsatisfying. Weller's uniform was perfect. His hands wouldn't stop shaking. Mills murmured without looking at him, "You tell the truth. You don't make excuses. And you don't interrupt the colonel." You weren't, Rodriguez said. That's why you ask. Weller nodded miserably. I will. Good. Rodriguez's tone gentled. That'll keep people alive. 3 weeks later, a civilian inspector in new coveralls walked into Hangar 12. The crew asked for her credentials, then asked what she needed. They offered a stand, a hand, and a fresh pot of coffee. Professional. Courteous. Alert. No one mentioned the day the colonel's folder hit the floor. They didn't need to. The hangar had learned how to breathe again. On Renner's desk, Marissa's report sat under a paperweight, 2 pages that had prevented 2 failures no one would ever thank her for. He kept it there not as a trophy, but as a reminder, some of the most important work on Earth is done by people who will never get a parade. And somewhere out beyond the perimeter fence, under a sky that bled from gold to black, a woman with a forgotten unit's mark on her spine walked into the dark without an escort. She would be back in a month. The helicopters would fly smoother. And the kids with chevrons would step a little more lightly, listen a little more closely, and remember that the quiet ones have stories, too. The desert night at Falcon Ridge was a different beast than the day. The heat didn't vanish, it coiled in the concrete, rising back in waves as the sun slipped behind jagged cliffs. Floodlights hummed along the flight line, stretching hard-edged shadows across the tarmac. Helicopters crouched like resting predators, rotors still but waiting, always waiting. Colonel Marcus Renner stood outside his office, watching the sky bruise into deep indigo. His reflection stared back at him in the window, creased forehead, silvering hair at the temples, jaw tight. For hours, he tried to convince himself what he'd seen inked on Marissa Hale's back was just coincidence. Some old symbol misread. An echo of myths whispered in secure rooms. But Renner had been an intelligence officer once. He knew better than to dismiss ghosts. The call that wasn't in the directory. He shut the office door and pulled out his personal phone. The number wasn't in any directory. It lived only in memory, an artifact of years when carrying it was like holding a lit match in your pocket. It rang once. Twice. A click. "Verification," said the voice on the other end. Smooth, clipped, genderless. Renner. Falcon Ridge. "I need background on a contractor. Hail, Marissa." Priority Alpha. A pause. Fingers on keys, the faint hum of a secure line burning bandwidth. Then, confirmed. Restricted clearance. Operational history redacted above TS/SCI, current status, dormant. Renner gripped the desk. Dormant? Meaning, no active missions. Meaning, you weren't supposed to see her. What if her cover was compromised? Another pause, longer this time. Then you did not see her at all. The line went dead. Renner stared at the phone, pulse heavy in his ears. Not supposed to see her. Not supposed to know. That meant one thing: she'd been one of the lost. He slid the phone away and pressed his palms to his desk, grounding himself. The folder on top was her inspection report. He opened it again, not because he doubted the findings, but because the neat handwriting made his gut twist. Letters sharp and straight, like each one carried a promise she'd bled to keep. The mess hall murmurs. By evening chow, the story had leaked. Not the truth, never the truth, but enough of a version to grow legs. At one table, Private Chin bragged about being in the room when it happened. He described tattoos in shaky detail, his voice carrying more excitement than sense. Beside him, Avery listened with wide-eyed awe. "Did you record it?" Avery asked. Chin shook his head, face pale. "Colonel ordered me to delete it. Said I'd be court-martialed if I didn't. I swear, Rodriguez, he looked like he'd seen a ghost." Rodriguez stabbed his fork into his tray, chewing hard to keep quiet. He'd seen enough. He knew enough. And he knew when not to add tinder to a fire. Across the hall, Weller sat stiff-backed, eyes down. His reprimand still hot in his ears. 6 weeks of extra duty ahead. Mandatory training. A career dent he wouldn't shake. But the real punishment was the silence of his peers. Not mockery, not laughter, just silence. Like he'd brushed up against something too large to joke about. Ghost in the hangar. Meanwhile, Marissa Hale worked late. The hangar was quiet now, just the occasional echo of boots across metal grating, the far-off cough of a generator. She knelt by the Bravo Series Blackhawk, flashlight in one hand, palm pressed to a hydraulic line with the other. It wasn't the work that made her stay, it was the ritual. The rhythm of tools, the texture of steel. Here, in the silence, she could almost believe she was just another mechanic. Not a relic. Not a survivor of a mission the world wasn't allowed to remember. She closed her eyes and traced the vibration of the pump. Too high. She wrote it down. The pen felt heavy in her hand, like it always did when she signed her name. If the bird fails, someone pays with their life. Don't let them pay for your mistakes. The thought was old. Older than this hangar. Older than this name. A conversation in the dark. Rodriguez found her as she was packing up, toolbox latch clicking shut. He hovered by the edge of the light pool, nervous. "Ma'am?" She looked up. Not startled, just aware. Always aware. "Yes, Airman?" He swallowed. The words felt heavier than rang aloud. Back in the bay, when it all happened. I should have said something. Should have stopped it. Marissa studied him. Her expression didn't soften, but it didn't harden either. And why didn't you? Because, his throat caught. Because I was scared of looking weak in front of the others. She closed the toolbox with finality, the sound sharp in the empty space. Then next time, she said, you decide which fear is worse, looking weak, or letting someone else carry your silence. Rodriguez nodded, shame biting deep. But also gratitude. Because she hadn't dismissed him. She'd given him a choice. The Colonel's watch. From the catwalk above, Renner watched. He shouldn't have been there. Should have been in his office finishing reports. But he needed to see her move, needed to confirm that the instincts honed in classified briefings weren't lying. The way she stood, weight balanced, feet set like every exit mattered. The way she scanned without turning her head. The way she carried her toolbox as if it weighed nothing, though he knew exactly how heavy it was. Every detail screamed what the ink had already told him: Marissa Hale wasn't a contractor. She was a ghost with a past buried deeper than coffins. And she had chosen to keep working. That, more than anything, told him who she really was. When Marissa finally stepped out into the night, the desert wind tugged at her collar. Just enough to reveal the edge of the triangle inked on her spine. The gate sergeant didn't ask. Didn't salute. Just handed back her badge with a nod that said he knew enough to leave it alone. She walked past the wire fence, into darkness. No entourage. No headlines. Just the sound of her boots on hot concrete, carrying her back into the kind of silence that could swallow a lifetime. Renner stayed at the railing, watching until she vanished. Then he whispered what no one else dared say out loud. She shouldn't exist. But she did. And the world was safer for it. The desert morning came hard and bright, as if the sun itself were determined to burn away the secrets of Falcon Ridge. But secrets don't dissolve with daylight, they burrow deeper, hiding in paperwork, in silence, and in the spaces where no one dares to ask questions. Colonel Marcus Renner sat in his office, blinds half drawn, the coffee on his desk gone cold. His inbox was stacked with reports, requisitions, and a dozen urgent memos about supply delays. But none of it held his attention. What he kept circling back to was the inspection report signed in neat, unforgiving handwriting, Marissa Hale. He'd read it 3 times before sunrise. Every recommendation was sharp, precise, impossible to ignore. 2 potential failures prevented, and not by luck. She saw things no one else did. Saw them the way combat veterans saw danger in an empty alley, the way wolves smelled blood on the wind. She wasn't supposed to exist. But she did. And that meant the system had cracks big enough to let a ghost slip through. Whispered lessons. Down in Hangar 12, the mood was different. The younger mechanics moved with a quiet alertness, the kind that comes after someone in your ranks is struck by lightning. Conversations stayed hushed. No one wanted to be the next Jason Weller. Staff Sergeant Harlan was in his element. He stalked between workbenches like a hawk, barking instructions, correcting torque values, making sure nobody cut corners. But beneath the bark, there was a subtle shift. His men felt it too. He wasn't just drilling them on procedures anymore, he was drilling them on respect. At the tool cage, Private Chin joked half-heartedly about his deleted video. Could have gone viral, he muttered, forcing a laugh. Rodriguez turned on him, face hard. You don't get it, do you? That wasn't a joke. That was someone's life written into her skin. You think likes and shares matter when the colonel damn near turned white? Chen looked away, cheeks burning. The hangar fell silent again. Orders from above. By mid-morning, Renner's secure phone buzzed. He locked the office door before answering. "This is Falcon Ridge," he said. "Colonel Renner," the voice replied. Flat, official. Too calm. "We received your verification request. Regarding your contractor." Renner swallowed. "And? You will treat her as cleared." "Beyond cleared. You will not interfere with her assignments. You will not ask further questions. Do you understand?" The phrasing wasn't unusual, but the weight behind it was. Orders like that came only when the stakes were high enough to bury careers. "Yes," Renner said. "Good. And Colonel, consider your curiosity closed. Some ghosts are meant to stay ghosts." The line clicked dead. Renner leaned back in his chair, pulse tight in his temples. He'd been in the military long enough to recognize the edge of a cliff. Push further, and he'd fall. But part of him couldn't shake the truth staring at him from Hale's report. If she could see what his own people had missed, then keeping her buried wasn't just politics. It was negligence. Weller's reckoning. Corporal Jason Weller reported for his punishment detail in the motor pool, coveralls already streaked with grease. Technical Sergeant Mills assigned him to inventory and tool cleaning, monotonous, thankless, deliberately humbling work. As Weller scrubbed oil off wrenches, Master Sergeant Harlan walked past, pausing just long enough to make eye contact. "You think you had a bad day in that hangar?" Harlan asked. His voice was calm, not angry. "Try being under fire in Kandahar with a bird grounded because some rookie didn't torque a bolt right. That's the weight she carries. That's why you keep your mouth shut until you know what you're looking at." Weller nodded, throat tight. For the first time, he realized his arrogance hadn't just cost him face, it could have cost lives. The return. 2 weeks later, Marissa Hale walked back into Falcon Ridge like nothing had happened. Same toolbox. Same clipboard. Same faded coveralls. But the atmosphere in Hangar 12 had changed. No mocking laughter. No careless smirks. The young mechanics moved aside for her, not out of fear, but out of something more durable, respect. She didn't acknowledge it. Didn't need to. She went to work, hands gliding over the Blackhawk's fuselage like a surgeon finding fractures beneath skin. Her presence was quiet gravity. Rodriguez approached cautiously. "Ma'am," he said, voice low. "About last time." Marissa looked up, expression unreadable. "I should have stepped in," he admitted. "I won't make that mistake again." Her eyes softened a fraction. "Good. Because next time, it won't be me they try it on." Rodriguez nodded, the lesson sinking deeper than any reprimand could. A hint of the past. That evening, Renner crossed the hangar to where she was closing her toolbox. "You could have disappeared," he said. "Taken the reprimand as a reason to never come back." Marissa tightened the latch, straightened slowly. "And left these kids to think silence makes them strong?" "No. They need to learn what it costs to look away." Renner studied her, then lowered his voice. "I know who you were." She met his gaze steadily. "No, Colonel. You know who I was supposed to be. There's a difference." He almost pressed further. Almost asked about the mission, about the ghosts. But the warning from above rang clear in his head. Some doors, once opened, couldn't be closed again. So instead he asked, "Why come back here at all?" Her answer was simple, final, "Because these birds keep kids alive. And I won't let them fall from the sky because somebody was too proud to listen." Then she picked up her toolbox and walked into the desert dusk, her silhouette swallowed by orange and violet light. The lesson that lingered. Weeks later, new recruits rotated through Falcon Ridge. They heard whispers of the contractor in 12, though the details blurred with retelling. Some called her a ghost. Others said she'd been Special Forces. Most didn't believe the story at all. But they believed the lesson. Respect before assumption. Questions before judgment. Silence doesn't mean weakness. And in a base built on steel, jet fuel, and secrecy, that was a stronger reinforcement than any rivet.